Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Georgianne Moore. I'm the Senior Director of Education and Alumni Relations here at Mount Sinai. And a big special thank you for the leadership team that's joining us tonight for our second year of the Mount Sinai Zoom Care Series. I'd first like to introduce Dr. David Muller. He is the Dean Emeritus here at Mount Sinai. He's been with the institution for over 30 years. Dr. Alicia Hurtado is attending psychiatrist and also the Associate Dean for Student Wellbeing and Student Affairs at ICON. She oversees the Office of Wellbeing and Resilience, which hopes to make medical education process more manageable through a vast resources. And Lauren Lankowski is the Director of Programs and Resources for Academic Excellence in the Department of Student Affairs. She works with med students on individual and group learning needs. So without further ado, I will let the team take it from here. But again, very much thank you for joining us tonight and welcome to the class of 2027 parents and loved ones.
Thank you, Georgianne. Just wanted to say hello as well. David Muller, as Georgianne said. It's really amazing that you all have chosen to spend a little bit of time with us, especially at the end of what I think probably for everyone is a really, really busy day. We hope to provide you with lots of information and resources about the support we provide for students. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so there will be lots of opportunities to ask questions, put them in the chat, and hopefully we can have more of a conversation after we give you kind of the framing introduction. The only other thing I want to say before we jump right in is, and this is going to be obvious to all of you, we live in a very complicated world. Medicine, healthcare is complicated, but the world around us, and I don't think I'd even need to speak to all the things that have happened even in the last few days in different parts of the world, in the Middle East and Afghanistan, sadly, tragedies. And I think probably none of you will be surprised to know that all of that spills into the environment of medical school. New York City, the United States, we are very much an international community and have friends, family all over the planet. And it's a really important thing for us to acknowledge to our students how things like that impact their lives as medical students, even though it may not be happening within our institution or within our campus. So I think it's just important for all of us to acknowledge that that is a big part of all of our lives, and how do we navigate that together. So before we start, we wanted to hear a little bit from you. You may be familiar with slido.com. If you type that into your phone, you'll see that you can enter a code. The code for this session is 1379271. If you take a moment to do that, it'll allow you to answer the following question. How do you feel about your loved one being in medical school? And as you answer the question, your answers will come up on the screen, in what's called a word cloud. And if you're not familiar with word clouds, the more people who type in the same word, the bigger the font gets. So lots of pride and excitement, a little bit of nerves and jitters, very, very common. Slido.com, or you can scan that QR code if it's easier than typing slido.com into your phone. Fantastic, which is how we feel every day when we have the privilege of coming to work and interacting with your students here, your loved ones. And let's see what else folks are saying. We've got a handful of responses so far. A little bit more nervousness, and very happy that whoever she is, loves it. That's awesome. And thank you, Georgianne. Yes, feel free to put your answers in the chat if that's easier than Slido. Happy, fantastic, excited. So a lot of up moods. Yes, nervous, absolutely, agree. Lots to be nervous about given how hard medical school is and how rigorous we all know it is. But as you can see from even the stuff that's coming up, there's a lot of positive energy. And that's really what we hope for, too, is to carry that momentum. A couple more responses in the chat. Thrilled, scared, glad she's doing something she loves, hopeful. Thank you, Deborah, for that. So these are the kinds of things that we want to be able to address over the course of the session. And of course, over the course of the years that your loved ones will be here, we will be here. You can reach out to us anytime. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But with that, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Alicia Hurtado, colleague, friend, work buddy, to take it from here.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. My name is Alicia Hurtado. I am a former Mount Sinai student, and I am a psychiatrist. And so in the last few years, I have taken on the role of serving as the Associate Dean for Medical Student Wellbeing. So a big part of what I do at the medical school is overseeing well-being programming and also identifying well-being needs for our students. A well-being need that came to light to us a few years back is that sometimes parents, loved ones, don't really have a very good understanding of what medical school looks like for your student. What is it that my student goes through? So we actually created this pamphlet that I'm highlighting right now. The pamphlet is entitled, "How Can You Support Your Medical Student?" And some of you may have already received this pamphlet at the home in a mailing, but if you haven't received it, we're going to place a link so that you are able to read it. But the pamphlet basically highlights and takes you through all of the requirements that medical students must meet throughout the different years. And with that information, we also are providing how you can support your student through those different periods. So one of the things that we like to highlight in the pamphlet is that, there is a way that you can support your student. And so I hope all of you take a minute to read that pamphlet. But I'm going to now switch it on over to Dr. Linkowski.
Thanks. So this is just an overview of what your student is going through this year, because we're the folks that are on this side of it, sort of monitoring how they're doing and helping them get through this. And so what they're experiencing right now is actually the tail end of a course we call Structures. Structures is our anatomy course. It covers a lot of information: anatomy, histology, embryology. It may be the first time your student has seen a cadaver, which is kind of a big experience in a young doctor's life. And at the same time, you'll see they're doing a course called the Art and Science of Medicine, which is what we like to call our doctoring course. And this is sort of the, practical skill of speaking to a patient and doing assessments, and what we think of when we think of going to a doctor. After Structures is over, they'll transition to what we call McG. This is things to do with biochemistry, genetics, cell bio. And then you'll see them again for winter break. In the spring, I think one of the challenging times is when they have two classes that overlap for the first time, but they're both excellent classes, immunology and pathology. Then they'll transition into physiology and then medical microbiology. And then that'll be their summer break. Most of our students use their summer break for a combination of, wellness and vacation, and also doing their first really serious research project. Now, in between each of the classes, you'll see we have two things called In Focus. In Focus, which is coming up next week, actually, I have to finish my slides, is really our time to get with students and give them the sort of extracurricular information they might need, or academic work around a topic that maybe doesn't fit into one of these courses. So things like biostatistics or the social determinants of healthcare. You'll see that all the courses are different lengths, and that's because they're really designed to be the length they need to be to encompass the information that the student needs to get. Every week, our students are assessed. So one week will be a quiz, which is typically lower value, and every other week will be a test, which is typically higher value. The test window is open over a weekend, so a student can test between, Friday night and Sunday night, and so that's their choice. They have a little flexibility there. I would say that usually our first quiz of any given course is either worth no points or worth very few points, so that it's a type of formative feedback, and so they can see, am I studying well for this course? So it really is structured to help them do well. And the last thing I'd say on this slide is that our tests aren't really cumulative. So a test will be for the information from the 2 weeks before it. And then sort of the clock resets, and now we have the next chunk of information. So if anybody has questions about that, you can dump them into the chat and we'll take them as they go. But that's generally what your student's going through academically right now. Sometimes folks are like, well, what is my student doing besides class? And some students are doing quite a lot. One thing I like to tell parents is it's not a race to be involved. So if your student is, oh my gosh, I have to start shadowing now, or I have to start doing research now, they really don't. This is a question they ask our office a lot. These opportunities will be here the whole time. So if your student's academically doing well and they're really interested in one of these things, they should go ahead and do that. But it's not a race. Remember, this is we're pass fail in the first 2 years of med school, and we really want students to find their niche. It's not a competition and it's not a race. What students, when they're ready, do become involved in is there a good volunteer opportunity for me? We have a great student-run clinic called EHOP, for example, but there's lots of volunteer opportunities across like a very wide range of student groups. And then often in the second year or at the end of first year, students often start taking on the leadership role in the club or the affinity group they joined in their first year. A lot of students in their first year just want to meet faculty, or they may want to explore different types of medicine. So they might email ophthalmologists and say, hey, I've never seen ophthalmology. Can I come watch you? And then again, research teams. Again, the summer is really where they'll do their first big research project. But some students who are interested or kind of know what they want to research might start those processes now, especially as second and third years start saying, hey, if you're interested in this, I have a project, you can come with me. So that's often what's going on outside of the academics, in addition to just acclimating and socializing. And I'm not going to belabor this. I'm sure your students have talked to their families a lot about this. But when we talk to medical students, we tell them that even if you were getting 4.0, A, 95% in every prior educational experience, it's okay if that's not happening now. It doesn't mean anything is wrong, because medical school information is higher volume, faster paced, and higher complexity. There's also a huge amount of memorization, and then you have to apply what you memorized. There are a lot of self-directed hours. So classes, some of them aren't mandatory, right? You have to get that information on whatever schedule you want. And so there's a lot of higher executive function that goes into not just keeping pace with the studying, but deciding how to study. And that's something my office helps with. And so a lot of students are in an adjustment period, right? The stuff they may have used for college, for their job, for their military service, for MCAT, just isn't working to the same degree. And then last but not least, multiple choice testing. For some of our students, they like it. And for some of our other students, they find it really challenging. So if your student is having that difficult academic adjustment, it's not a big deal, but this is some of the reasons it may be happening. And so I guess your big question is, what can we do about it? And so this Office of Student Affairs and MedEd in general offers a lot of assistance. So I have a colleague, Dr. Kelly Lassman, who's now full-time, which is very exciting for us. So your student can meet with me or with Kelly as much as they want. And we sort of describe our work like a personal trainer or a coach for your academic life. And so we can help you decide how to study or how to take tests. We run lots of small group learning activities. So for example, in the physiology course, we have groups that meet with a peer tutor and they discuss difficult concepts. And we do things like this periodically. At key times, we actually gather the whole group together and we say, okay, folks, this is really important. We want you to know about how to approach a practice question or what to do about step one if that's next year. In cases where a student is really struggling, we will pair them with a peer tutor, and that's at no cost to the student. And then finally, I think a lot of people in the prior, in their response to this meeting asked, what about step one and step two? And so we purchase Amboss, starting in, actually your student just got it a couple of weeks ago. They don't need to start using it now. It's really something we want them to use in second year. But we purchase them that Q bank all the way through their step one and their step two process. They have a dedicated period to study for step one. We buy them even a voucher for a practice test. And so there's a lot of support around making sure our students are ready to pass their licensure exams. So we really are here for your students' individual needs when it comes to finding a learning process that works for them. And so, that all sounds great, but I think I'm going to pass it to Alicia because I think what I told you is that there's a lot of transition happening. And so here you go.
Thank you, Lauren. So now that Lauren gave this very brief introduction to what the first year curriculum looks like and what are some of the expectations for our students, we wanted to just talk a little bit more about what are some of the wellness needs that we have identified for our medical students, and also just spend a good amount of time talking to you about what some of those resources are, with the goal that you can then share those resources with your students if they ever have the need for those resources. So I just wanted to take a step back and just really quickly explain that, one of the approaches that we take in medical school in terms of talking about wellness is not that, our expectation is that our students always be well or that our students always remain well. And that remaining well means that we should always be happy. Because it is sometimes more harmful to have this very sort of like false expectation that we should always feel happy. As Dr. Muller spoke about in the beginning, life throws us a lot of curveballs. Medical school is very challenging. Being a doctor is very challenging, and so it is really important that we learn how to fine tune the coping skills that we already possess. Some of those coping skills that our students have used in the past in order to get into medical school. And how can those coping skills help you through the tough times? Because our students will experience some anxiety. They are going to experience disappointments. As we're seeing right now, right, they may be going through some difficult times just outside of medical school, and at the same time, they are expected to manage, those academic responsibilities. So, how can our students manage all of this, right? And so, our approach is about helping our students acquire new coping skills. We do a lot of normalizing difficult emotions. It's important that when we talk about things such as anxiety, that we not always talk about anxiety as being necessarily bad, but that when you experience some anxiety, how can you manage that anxiety so that you can go on to do your responsibilities? And also, when can you begin to identify when anxiety is actually becoming a problem that needs to be addressed? So a lot of what we do with our students is providing psychoeducation about when is it necessary for you to get additional support if you're having anxiety that's getting in the way. So I wanted to just talk about anxiety that our students may actually face during these transitions. As coming in as a new medical student, it is a really big transition, right? As Lauren already highlighted, our students are used to being students. They're, at this point, they're like professional students. But being in medical school is different. And so how can our students begin to manage some of the anxiety that is absolutely normal that everyone experiences during times of change when something new arises? And so one of the things that we've been talking to our first year students about is about how to begin to identify what are some of the things that ease your anxiety, right? We talk a lot about anticipation anxiety. That is that feeling that we sometimes get that a lot of you guys actually already identified in the beginning, right? That feeling of excitement that sometimes feels like anxiety. That nervous energy that when we're excited about something, but at the same time, it can make us feel uncomfortable. So that anticipation anxiety is something that our students are experiencing. It's exciting to be in an anatomy lab. It also is very anxiety inducing to have the responsibility of working with a cadaver. So the other thing that happens too for our students during these times of transition is that they begin to integrate this new identity as a medical professional. It is a time when our students begin to think more about who they are, what are some of the things that motivate them, what is that thing that motivates them, gets them up in the morning, and how they can begin to integrate that identity as a medical professional. And so that can be actually something that for some, can be very difficult to integrate. It is a new experience. The other thing that also happens for medical students in that first semester is that they begin to have a lot more exposure to illness and human suffering. Our students in the first year very early on are exposed to patients, and they work with patients, they see patients. And so for them, it may be the first time that they actually see human suffering that are close. So it is really important to think about, what are some of these experiences that students are having in the beginning of that first year, so that we can then support them. And again, reassure them that a lot of this is okay to be feeling these difficult emotions. and support them through that, and not necessarily always encouraging them to not feel that way, right? To not say, well, you shouldn't be anxious. This is, why are you worried about this? You can handle these kinds of things. Don't worry about that, right? So more of sort of validating that, yeah, this does sound scary, right? This does sound like it's an anxiety-inducing situation. But I'm here to support you. I'm here, if you need me, if you want to talk about it, I'm here to listen. Next slide, please. So the other thing that we talk a lot with our students about is burnout. Burnout is a term that we use in the professional environment to describe when professionals are exhausted from just working very hard, and they begin to feel they begin to lose their joy in the work that they do. And so it's almost like a conflict in some of what it is that you're feeling, and that desire to do well, right? And so you may see that somebody that is burning out begins to lose their motivation to go to work. They may the quality of the professional work may be going down. And so often that, that may be as a result of burnout. And so a lot of what we do with our students is helping them identify what is burnout, what does it look like? And then we talk a lot about the resources that are out there to help students prevent burnout, right? That's the goal, is to prevent burnout. Let's begin to identify things that can potentially burn you out, intervene so that you don't actually burn out. And so I just wanted to highlight the Office of Wellbeing and Resilience. Our Office of Wellbeing and Resilience has a lot of wonderful resources for our students. Our students know about this office, and a lot of what we do is advocacy for well-being interventions for not just for our medical students, but for our graduate students, our faculty members, and our residents at the hospital. And so that's our Office of Wellbeing. Just wanted to highlight that. Next slide, please. So in the medical school environment, we use a wellness model that takes into account, again, well-being priorities, needs that we identify as being unique to medical students. And so some of those well-being priorities, I'm going to just go through them, and I'm going to very briefly just mention, what are we doing with it? What are we doing to address each of those well-being priorities? A big one for us at Mount Sinai is community building. The other one is self-awareness, resilience building. So helping our students build on some of those resilience coping skills that they already possess, encouraging our students to embrace support, and emphasizing the importance of self-care. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about community building. This is a lot of what we do in our Office of Student Affairs. Lauren and I are both part of that office. This is the funnest part of the work that we do. We do a lot of student events. As you can see here, we sometimes, I think this one, the picture in the top is last year, our students went apple picking. We want our students to get together, get to know each other in informal settings. We took our students to different parts of the city. The picture at the bottom, we went to Orchard Beach in the Bronx. The other one is at the Botanical Gardens with our faculty advisors. So we try to do these events, again, to help build those relationships so that when our students need support, those relationships have already been created, and so our students feel comfortable reaching out to us. We also hold events, keeping in mind that not all of our students have the support at home. And so, for example, we have holiday events for our students who sometimes cannot go home for Thanksgiving. It's our annual Friendsgiving event. We have an end of the year celebration. We don't call it Christmas, or it's more of sort of like an end of the year event / New Year event. It's a gathering where students can celebrate with each other, and we are very intentional in promoting these events in collaboration with our student leaders and student groups, and also, and I'll talk a little bit more about the community. The learning communities that each student belongs to, where we promote these events as well. Next slide, please. So every student at Mount Sinai is part of what we call a learning community. So our learning communities are made up of a smaller group of students who are in certain classes together, and they have certain they go through certain experiences together. These happen multiple times a year. Every learning community of students has a faculty advisor, a wellness advisor, and a student leader assigned to it. Um, a faculty advisor is a faculty member at the medical school who stays with the student for the next 4 years and advises them on things such as academic advising, career advising. Sometimes we're just there to lend a supportive ear. So that's what a faculty advisor does. Every learning community also has a wellness advisor. Our wellness advisors are clinical social workers at Mount Sinai Hospital who have a lot of experience in providing emotional support. They're not providing psychotherapy to our students, but what they do is that they get to know the students. It is not mandatory. This is something that's completely voluntary, but they reach out to students. So, for example, because of the events that happened over the weekend overseas, our wellness advisors reached out to all of their students and just reminded them that if they just want someone to talk to, or they just want someone that can just provide a little extra support, to please reach out to them. So our wellness advisors will meet with the student one-on-one and just provide a extra support. And so every learning community, as I mentioned, has a faculty advisor and a wellness advisor. We try to have these groups of individuals, have other community building events. Again, the goal being in being able to have that emotional support that is needed during medical school. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to introduce you guys to our faculty advisors. So they're all physicians. I'm actually also a faculty advisor, but our faculty advisors are made up of pediatricians, psychiatrists. Dr. Cromwell is an internist. Dr. Dweck is an ophthalmologist. Dr. Bania is an emergency room doctor. So we have a lot of different specialties represented within our faculty advisors, but these are all incredibly dedicated physicians. They've all been in this role for many, many, many years. And they are the person that students can turn to if they are ever going through a difficult time and they need someone to talk to about how they may be able to receive special accommodations, or maybe a change in their academic plan in order to be able to be successful in medical school. So if you ever hear your students saying that they're struggling, they're not sure that they're going to pass a course, make sure that you ask them, have you spoken to your faculty advisor about this? Because I hear that they can be very helpful in helping you think about what other alternatives there are for you. Next slide, please. One of the things that we've been talking about in the slide that I was mentioning about our CARES model is the importance of helping our students become more self-aware. So one of the things that we do in some of the wellness curriculum that we deliver to our students is over and over emphasizing the importance of self-awareness, that in order to be a physician that takes very good care of their patients, it's also really important for us to get to know ourselves really well and to become more self-aware. And so you will hear your students maybe talking a little bit about this, how in Mount Sinai, they're constantly asking me, like, how did you feel about that? And how it's so important to move away from a very critical, idealized view of ourselves, like this idea that we can't make mistakes, the idea that we have to be perfect in order to be an effective doctor, and to move to a more forgiving stance, right? That everyone makes mistakes. As Dr. Linkowski, mentioned, before you might have passed all your courses with A's, but that's okay if you didn't pass this class in flying colors. You did your best, and that's okay, right? That it is okay to be kind to ourselves, and to not be very critical. And so we want to also just encourage you as somebody that's supporting your student to think about that, right? What are the kinds of messages that we're sending to our student when they're feeling overwhelmed or they've made a mistake? Are we being supportive, or are we sometimes criticizing when they're not coming, when they're not being perfect, right? And that's okay. That we're not asking anyone to be perfect. And so I'm going to just go on to the next slide because I'm just aware of time, and I want to make sure that we leave time for questions. So I also just wanted to highlight other resources that we have for our students. All Mount Sinai students have access to the COM app, and we're also excited to mention that they can also share the COM app with 5 other individuals. So maybe your student has already shared their login for the COM app, because that is actually something that you can do. You can also use the COM app. The COM app is a really wonderful tool that has a lot of mindfulness, meditation exercises. It also has what are called sleep stories. They're these really beautiful stories that make you focus on something that is very relaxing and soothing, so that these stories can help you fall asleep. It's actually one of our more popular interventions within the COM app that our students are using, unfortunately, at all times of the night. But we do hear that our students really do like the sleep stories. So that's a COM app. Encourage your student to use it. We also have we've partnered with an outside mental health group. They are called Well Connect. What this service provides is mental health care. So this is actually mental health treatment. Unlike the wellness advisors that I mentioned before are providing more sort of like support, Well Connect will actually provide psychotherapy, short-term psychotherapy for our students. And the nice thing about Well Connect is that they can provide the care even if your student is out of state. So if your student is traveling to California for an elective for 2 months, they can reach out to a therapist through Well Connect to provide them with emotional support during that time. Well Connect is also available to the family members, to the immediate family members of the student. So if a student has a partner, is married, the spouse is able to also access Well Connect. So that's also a short-term psychotherapy support that is provided for our students. It doesn't provide medication treatment, but it does provide short-term psychotherapy. As I already mentioned, our wellness and faculty advisors, that's another well-being resource. And then I just wanted to talk about our student trainee mental health clinic. All of our Mount Sinai medical students have access, free access to the student trainee mental health clinic. And so next slide, I just want to highlight our student trainee mental health program. We're very proud of this mental health clinic. It is directed by Dr. Sukumaran, who is a psychiatrist and very, very experienced and well-trained. And so you can see here that we have several psychologists that are providing psychotherapy services to our students. Again, it is free of charge. And most of the treatment that students are all of the treatment that the students are receiving is under the guidance of these professionals who will determine what is the most appropriate treatment for your student. So this is a student training mental health program. Again, if you're worried about your student and think that maybe they can use a little extra support, these are the folks that they should be reaching out to. So I'm going to pause here, and we're going to open it up to questions.
There's a question in the chat. I'll read through it quickly because it's a long question, and let's see if we can address it. Following the Hamas terror massacre that took place in Israel, I have a 2-part question. One, in addition to wellness advisors, has the school reached out to its Jewish students and the student body at large to offer support or any other resources? And 2, across the country, police departments have announced increased security around Jewish institutions given Mount Sinai's Jewish identity and heritage, while in New York we have already seen expressions in support of Hamas and the terror attack that took place in Israel. has the school engaged with NYPD to discuss potential adjustments to its security and the way it interfaces with NYPD? I can address some of that, but I don't know if Alicia and or Lauren, you want to touch on any of it?
Yeah, and maybe I can start off. This was our top priority. As soon as we were able to get together and discuss this yesterday morning, Monday morning. We talked about how were we going to lend support to all our students. And so what we decided to do is that our wellness advisors, the clinical social workers that I mentioned before, we're going to send a message directly to every single student. And just remind them, if you need a little support, if you want someone to just lend a supportive ear or guide you, we are here for you. Our faculty advisors are also reaching out to students on a one-on-one basis. We didn't send our larger institutional message because the hospital sent a message to all of our students, all of the faculty and staff. And so we just wanted to make sure that our students knew that if they needed extra emotional support, that was available through their wellness advisors and their faculty advisors. Today at 5 o'clock, we sent another message to all of our student body highlighting how their safety is our top priority. And we, in that, also talked about, if any student is feeling unsafe, to please directly reach out to our Office of Student Affairs. Please make us aware. We also shared the number to our security department. We also shared how they can also report through our mistreatment reporting form, any instance where a student may feel that they've been discriminated or treated unfairly, that they can report this so that we can actually look into this, because we all absolutely understand that during times like this, it is really important to provide that extra security and support. So that message did go out to our students at 5 o'clock today. And so I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and I addressed in the chat the second question about NYPD and their relationship with our security. They really work hand in glove, and they have done that across innumerable events over the course of the last years and even decades. The question about WellConnect, maybe Dr. Hurtado also, is WellConnect available for siblings of students?
Yes. So it's immediate family members, so that does include siblings.
Thank you. And let's see what other questions crop up. Incredible audience. We have 63 people. Wow. All waiting to eat dinner too. So, or maybe some of them are eating dinner already. Who knows, right? I've always heard the saying that getting into medical school is the most difficult part. Does anyone on the panel share that saying or share that sentiment? Getting in is the most difficult part. I see Dr. Lankowski shaking her head. I don't know if anyone wants to. I have some thoughts too, but I don't know if anyone else wants to respond to that.
I think you should go, Dr. Miller. I'll give my one sentence, which is, I have never said that once in my life.
Yeah. My thought, I see Mario, thank you. It is just the beginning. It's not the most difficult part, but I'm also trying to interpret where the question is coming from. Once you are here with us, and I think we can certainly say this for our school, we're going to see to it that you succeed. It's going to take an enormous amount of hard work. Yes, harder than pre-med and getting in, but there is this, I think from our perspective, this threshold feeling that you've done an enormous amount, and by virtue of being here, we have 100% faith in your ability to complete this program and go on successfully to residency and have an incredible career. So from that perspective, there is a way of interpreting and saying that, it's the most difficult part, so to speak, but there's a lot of hard work ahead. And I want to specifically point out what Dr. Hurtado said in the beginning. Aside from the academic work and the rigor, most of our students, most of us in life have never really been exposed to illness and how vulnerable people can be when they're suffering. And the beginning of life and the end of life, that is at least as much of a challenge as it is to take the tests and everything else. You listed an impressive wellness program. Do you find it difficult to get students to take advantage of the program, or do students naturally gravitate to making use of these programs?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that there are some students that naturally gravitate to making use of the programs. We find that there are some students that perhaps because they've already been exposed to some of this programming as an undergrad, and they've benefited from it. Some students really take advantage of it. Our wellness advisors are utilized. Our faculty advisors do work very hard, and they are utilized. Our student training mental health program is working very, very hard. They have more patients that they can handle sometimes. So they are very, very busy. So I would say that our students are using the resources, but there are, I think, a group of students that, sometimes it is hard for them to reach out um, to some of these resources. This reminds me that we should talk a little bit about that, I think often the culture of medicine, there is a stigma of getting help, right? That doctors should not be getting help, or a doctors, should not be should not be feeling unwell. And so sometimes I think our students fear that if they express any challenges or any difficulties, then in some way they're going to be negatively reviewed. And so I just want to highlight, right, that is not something that happens in our student body, right? If a student whether a student obtains mental health care in our student training mental health program, none of us know about that. There's a big firewall between the care that our students receive through the student training mental health program and our Office of Medical Education. So we do not know if any of our students are in mental health care. So if you ever hear your student expressing some concerns about, oh, I don't want to get mental health care through Mount Sinai because I'm worried that, the institution, something bad is going to happen, you can just reassure them that that is not something that they should be worried about. Also, we find that sometimes our students may carry a lot of shame about any mental health, diagnosis or disability. We're finding, and I think it's really wonderful that more and more this generation, they're a lot more comfortable in some of the challenges, and we think that that's really wonderful. So we are seeing that is something that is getting in the way of your students as their support system, as people that that love them and want the best for them. It is important to just reassure them, right, that during times of a lot of stress, sometimes we all need a little extra help. Some of us, Dr. Muller and I, have talked about in the past about how, during our training, we have gotten help, right, extra help, and sometimes that help is just temporary. And sometimes that help, additional support and help, is lifelong. But that it is okay to get extra help, and it doesn't make you weak. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to be a good doctor.
And I usually sort of compare it to like other things we do to maintain ourselves. Like nobody thinks it's shameful that I pay a dentist to clean my teeth, right? Like, and comparing it to things like that. I also think that our students, we try to frame it as a department, as it's training for your future self, right? Being a doctor is challenging, and we want you to have a happy, healthy career where you're available to your patients or to do science or whatever your goal is. And so this is just the place where you get to practice those skills, right? And some of those skills are self-care, and some of those are academic, and some of those might be professional. But this is the place you can practice that in a safe place with people to help you learn, just like when you learn to do something else.
Both my husband and I have minimum knowledge of the medical field, so I don't think I can give any advice to my son throughout his medical school years, which I don't even think we agree with that statement, but let's get to it at the end of the question. So I do appreciate all these programs and support provided by the school. Is there any resource or reading that you could recommend to parents like us who do not have a deep understanding in this field so we can provide better support to our children? Again, I have some thoughts, but I'm going to leave it to Doctors Lenkowski and Hurtado first and see what they think about that. Really interesting question.
It's a great, I actually just kind of want to push a little on the question, if it's okay. It's a question that's kind of personal to me. My parents have 10th grade educations. So I think I'm not a physician, right? I have a doctorate in education, so it is very different. But I think my parents very much perceived that they couldn't help me, starting at about the fourth grade. And I think it's because they were thinking of it in terms of like, I can't help you do math. You know what I'm saying? But I think that what they did give me and what you're probably giving your student, whether it's your child, your spouse, your grandson, whatever, is the sort of the love, the support, the encouragement. I think a lot of problems in med school, while they're particular to the medical field, are really just the problems we all have in a specific environment. Like before I had this job, I worked in a school that mostly trained like accountants and nurses. And yes, I spent a couple months learning the specifics of how people learn in med school, but the problems my students had trying to be accountants were the same as the problems they have trying to be doctors, just in a slightly different context. And so in some ways, I think that you're selling yourself short a little bit. As to specifics, I'll pass it to Dr. Hurtado, who is a physician.
So I would, also just recommend to look at the pamphlet. And that pamphlet can give you very specific tips about how you can support your student throughout the different phases of their medical school education. But I agree with Dr. Lankowski, right, that the support that we're talking about is really being that person that they can go to when the going gets tough. I tell students, right, sometimes some of us that are in the medical field, we take care of others. It's hard for us. We're very independent. It's hard for us to ask for help. But this is a time when you were in medical school to ask for help. This is the time to reach out to those who can listen to what it is that you may need. Sometimes it actually is just somebody to help you do your laundry, or somebody that can bring you a nice warm meal, right? Or someone that can say, you don't have to go to this family event. I know you have that big exam coming up. So this family event, don't worry about it. Everyone will forgive you if you're not there, because we know you have to study for that exam. So it really is about how we can just support our students through just knowing that they are there, that we're there for them.
Really good point. There's a question a little bit above from Rupert Bryan. How likely is it for a Mount Sinai grad to get matched for residency if they apply? Lauren, do you want to take that? Or,
Sure.
Could.
Highly, highly likely. We have excellent match rates. I think, talking about match rates as a sum total is a challenge, because it's so heavily dependent, not only on the student, but, the specialty they're interested in. Certainly you have extreme ends like family medicine to, say, neurosurgery, right? Or students who will apply widely in any geographic area versus students who are like, it's Chicago or nothing, so I think I don't want to promise things that cannot be promised. But typically our students, we have, Dr. Hurtado, am I misrepresenting a plus 95% match rate? And most of our students get choices 1 through 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
A quick question about how frequently this parents meeting takes place. I don't know if Georgianne or Jackie want to chime in on that. I know that we have it at least one. Oh, here's Georgianne.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us this evening, and I hope you're finding this really helpful. I'm sure, as the Slido said, it's exciting, it's nerve-wracking, but we are here to tell you that we promise you we are here for your student as they go through medical school, and we really do believe that a successful student is a reflection of all of us. So we will meet annually each year, inviting you to join in a format just like this, and specifically addressing what you will be going through each year as the student goes through. So second year, taking the boards; third year, taking the classroom into clinical, and then, of course, fourth year going into residency programs. And Dr. Hurtado, I'm very premature in this, but we're also looking at developing something like this for new residents and coming back to Sinai, because again, the support doesn't end when you walk out the doors here, and we feel really passionate about that. So I'll just leave it at that, but also don't ever hesitate to email. I'll put my email in the chat, and I'd be happy to connect you with this group if you need anything after.
And I just put a link in the chat to the course schedule, so you know exactly what they're going through over the course of time. What is the best way, to initiate a discussion with your child about whether they are anxious or nervous? the best way to initiate that discussion if you suspect that they might be anxious or nervous?
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great question. I think it's really important to not assume that that's what the person is feeling. So I would just comment on what it is that they're observing, right? Like, oh, I noticed that you were up all night. Uh, you know, can I help you with something? So just like a very general question, I would just name whatever it is that you've observed that has you concerned. So I wouldn't assume that it is anxiety, because we don't know if it's anxiety, right? It may be something else. And so I think it's really important that we not name the emotion for the person, but rather describe what it is that you've observed, right? I have a 13-year-old son, and when he gets anxious, he gets very irritable. He's just cranky. And so I will sometimes say to him, like, hey, Benny, wow, you're cranky, right? And normalize it, right? Like, I'm not criticizing it. It's just sort of, wow, you're cranky. And then, maybe that kind of gets him going and starts telling me like, oh, I'm so stressed out about, and then he'll start talking about what it is that he's feeling. Very quickly, again, we want to normalize anxiety. When anxiety is something that we should worry about a little bit more is when you are noticing that the person is not sleeping or not eating well, person is losing weight. The person, your loved one, may actually be avoiding certain things because they're feeling very anxious, right? So a student who is not studying because it's making him very anxious to study, a student who doesn't want to sit for an exam because the exam is making them very anxious. So anxiety that is getting to become a situation where you're avoiding that situation that's making you anxious is one where I would worry. I may actually approach somebody and talk to them a little bit more about that. However, one of the things that we talk to our students about is that you don't want to wait till it's actually a big problem, because we have our wellness advisors, right? And you have Well Connect. If you just need to talk about something that's troubling you, let's not wait till it actually becomes a problem. It's also okay for you to just talk to somebody about what it is that you're feeling.
Or just the open-ended question about the experience, right? So, how did it feel to do your first presentation? Because I think one of the things I try to normalize is it's fine to feel more than one thing at once about school, right? I can be super excited and I can be really anxious, right? That's just my brain getting ready to have a performance, right? And I think almost every time I've asked a student a closed question, oh, did that make you upset? I've been wrong, and then I have to do the, like, Lauren, be a better teacher, ask the open-ended question. So that's just something I try to practice also.
Thank you both. And this might be the last question, just so that we are making sure that we stop on time. Do you have a common platform or an app where parents can share ideas, questions, concerns, like, for example, a WhatsApp, which is a great suggestion. I don't know that we have something like that yet. Right?
Our students create WhatsApps for their year, but I don't think we've ever engaged with this idea before. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And maybe that's something that we can all follow up on as a group after this session, and then get back to you all with how we might be able to operationalize that. It is a great idea. It looks like other people like the idea too. So it'll make for a nice ongoing conversation. And with that, should we wrap up? Okay, who's wrapping up? Is it me? Yeah, so then the wrap up really is just to say thank you to everyone for your care and love and attention. Hopefully you will stay in touch with us, reach out if you need anything. We appreciate all of your questions and thoughtful suggestions. And we'll see you around. If you're coming to visit the campus, you can reach out to us too. We'd love to meet and say hi in person. Have a good evening and enjoy dinner if you haven't had it yet. Good night, everybody.